Hello, everyone, and welcome to the FLP final presentations. For those, hello, everyone. Sorry, guys, got an echo going on. So, for those of you that don't know, FLP is one of SNMA's leadership initiatives where we take 10 pre-med and 10 medical students each year. We invite them into our program and they learn a lot about leadership development, and they also complete projects within the strategy team or within an individual project as a national committee fellow. So first up, we're going to hear from our strategy team projects and then our national committee project fellows. And just to give you guys a little bit more background on the strategy teams, I'm going to bring on our strategy team coordinator, Adaku.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. So the strategy team is a group of three group of 9 fellows that have been working very closely with the SPC, and they have been basically talking about issues that concern the business of the SNMA and how we can address issues that have been ongoing in the SNMA. So for this team, strategy team 1, they're going to be tackling enhancing alumni engagement. We're going to have Sofana Bong and Anita, our fellows, talk about these issues. And I'm going to give this over to them, being cognizant of time, and they will talk to us about what approaches they use, what survey they did, and what solutions they have for us as an organization. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Adaku. So, Safana Bong and Anita, I'm going to add you to this stage and feel free to take it away.
Everybody see the slides?
No, not yet. I'm still trying to download them. Let's see if I can. Let's see if sharing my screen is better. Is everyone able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, then.
Okay, so hello everyone and welcome to the Strategy Team 1 final presentation, Enhancing Alumni Engagement. My name is Anita Anidu and I will be presenting with my team member, Safana Bong Obat.
Thank you.
Now let's meet the team. So really quick background about me. I am from Houston, Texas. I graduated from the University of Texas at San Antonio. And here's just a list of some SNMA leadership positions and some fun facts about me. And now we have Safan, who will introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Safana Bong Obat. Hi. My hometown is Chicago, Illinois. I got my undergraduate degree in biochemistry and political science, and I'm currently a second year at Rosalind Franklin University, the Chicago Medical School.
And lastly, we were fortunate enough to have Dr. Priscilla Posse as our principal investigator. And as you can see, she has a very long history of SNMA in addition to numerous prestigious awards. And the purpose of our project is alumni engagement. Next slide. And now we start with the introduction.
Hello, everyone. As SNMA enters its 60th anniversary, we are struck in a repetitive cycle of using the same alumni for many events, resulting in the lack of diversity and inclusivity within our alumni network. As we predominantly engage with the same alumni repeatedly, we inadvertently overlook and fail to connect with a significant portion of our alumni community. Also, the same alumni become overstretched or even burdened with SNMA involvement. Consequently, alumni remain underutilized and deprived of valuable opportunities within the organization and are disengaged from the organization. Our problem statement can be broken down into the following questions that need to be addressed. The first, how can we broaden our outreach and actively involve more diverse range of new alumni? 2, how can we engage with alumni that may have been lost? And finally, how can we collect alumni data efficiently so that they remain engaged with the organization? As a team, we work to better understand this issue and provide possible recommendations to address this perceived disengagement and underutilization alumni. We conducted interviews to gain an understanding of how SNMA currently solicits and engages its current alumni by interviewing alumni-related committees and leadership. We interviewed the Alumni Affairs Committee with Olivia Kane and Tan Hua, the Convention Planning Alumni Subcommittee with Crystal Magwood, and the Membership Director Headquarters. Please note that the Alumni Subcommittee is a subcommittee of the Membership Directors. We also interviewed current alumni who were historically part of SNMA leadership to understand how SNMA historically engaged alumni and how current alumni feel about SNMA engagement with them. Here's a list of the alumni we interviewed and their past leadership roles. And here's an example of the types of questions we asked interviewed alumni to gain a better understanding of how they perceive their role as alumni and the possible benefits they gain from being alumni. And here's a continuation of those questions.
Now let's dive into the results. So we start off with the 3 major themes being structure, data, and network as overlapping topics that were brought up by those that we interviewed. The first theme that we go into is structure. As we went through the interview process, we quickly noticed that many are working on goals without connecting with other alumni committees on similar projects. Many position holders lack a clear understanding of their goals and objectives. Many felt that when they obtained their position, their responsibilities were unclear. So this resulted from a lack of transitional meetings from past officers to current position holders because many did not go through the process of transitions. So this slowed down the much needed progression in our problem statement that we are going over today. Next slide. And some quotes obtained during these interviews where I was basically told, come up with what you can and we will support you, and never really outlined. I was committed to trying to find out, really just told me that it was what I made of it. Next slide. So for our second theme, we have data. Our results concluded that there is not a centralized place for alumni data to be maintained, updated, and accessible for all. And if there is, many are unaware of it, aiding in the loss of resources and confusion. It seems that there is a missing or lack of information within the alumni database. And with the current information located in the database, much of it is incorrect or has yet to be updated to the correct information. And lastly, for data, some have expressed that they have difficulty accessing needed information. Next slide. And I quote, "The database we have is very bare bones." And another interview states, "I don't have a list of alumni. I've been trying to contact others to help get in touch with alumni." Next slide. Going into theme 3, network, due to the lack of information in the database, alumni stresses that it is very challenging to connect with more past SNMA members, creating the question of how do we get more alumni involvement at AMEC and at regional and local levels? Seems like we only reach out to alumni when we need something. Many alumni felt that their relationship between them and SNMA is very one-sided, which promotes burnout and disengagement. And some alumni don't really know what is going on or who to contact to get involved in SNMA. And some are interested but don't really know how to get involved or who to contact. And next slide. And here we have some more quotes, right? Some more evidence. I wish I could be engaging alumni more and trying to highlight the alumni in AMEC, and revamping social media presence to make sure that they know what is going on and can participate if they want to. So here we continue and we dive into historical perspective interviews with the three major themes being connection, resources, and benefits. So diving into connection, we see that there is a difference in engagement between members who held leadership and board positions and those who did not. One interviewer stated that many of the more recent alumni are past board members in comparison to those who were general members. Because they established that bond from the beginning on the board and they were closely working together, they were more likely to continue engagement with SNMA after graduation. Some also mentioned timing as another roadblock to alumni engagement. When we're reaching out to alumni, it's often right after graduation when they are busy with residency and handling that big transition. So then they stop responding and engaging. And because they're busy, we stop reaching out because we're not hearing back from them. And then when they are available, that engagement with SNMA, that connection has been lost with potential alumni. Next slide. And some more quotes. If you don't have the loyalty, why would you want to get involved? We're not asking people at the right time in their journey. What about senior attendings? Next slide. So now resources. When we asked one of the interview questions, such as how do you see alumni engaged and what roles do you see that alumni play within SNMA, they stated that alumni give a lot to SNMA. They provide mentorship, speakers for sowing seeds, participation in AMEC and on panels, knowledge and guidance, and so much more. Next slide. And here are some more supporting quotes. Alumni are untapped resources. These individuals are like think tank and find ways to tap into alumni repeatedly, maintaining the relationship and not just, hey, alumni, can you give us some money? Next slide. So this leads us straight into benefits. What do alumni get from being engaged with SNMA? Simply put it, there isn't really much of a benefit. There is no mentoring for graduates and residents. There is no support for career, professional growth, and development. And when speaking on this topic, interviewees suggested building a stronger relationship between SNMA and NMA, and helping alumni get connected with NMA could be a potential benefit. Next slide. And here are some more quotes. How do students know what residents and attending physicians need or want? And there is nothing I get from SNMA that I don't already get from other organizations I'm currently in. And so now let's talk about discussions.
Yes. Our primary observations arose from the interviews to include an increased engagement with NMA for alumni, strengthening roles in transition for alumni affairs, and building stronger connections and community with alumni. Our collected themes and observations suggest the solution to addressing underutilization and disengagement among SNMA alumni need to include 1, better and more documentation, 2, better benefits for alumni, 3, better connections between SNMA members that lead to increased desire to become SNMA alumni, and 4, a stronger relationship with NMA. The following are a list of challenges we perceive need to be addressed before we can do this. First, what role do alumni play in the organization? Is there a benefit to being an SNMA alumni? Should there be member benefits? How do we develop roles and procedures for alumni affair officers? What documentation and databases are needed for alumni affairs? And what connections to NMA will be beneficial for current and future alumni?
So now let's go into what we suggest to recommend for our problem statement. Create one comprehensive alumni affairs committee to discuss and make sure that there are clearly defined roles and goals to avoid unnecessary confusion. Interconnected structure with officers and headquarters. Instead of everyone being very siloed in their work, everyone should be working together and pooling from one source. And include alumni to help support students in reaching those goals and establishing those roles. Next slide. And we have alumni database as a second recommendation. Throughout this project, we found out that there is not really a centralized database accessible for all to refer to. There is not one place to access current alumni information for needed events, panels, and other social opportunities within SNMA. So there needs to be a set of rules similar to a protocol book on how to access the database, who is in charge of the database, how to update the database and the steps involving that, along with who is responsible for what to close these gaps and holes in the confusion of the alumni database. And third recommendation is an alumni survey. So the purpose of this survey will be to establish alumni roles, what they think the role of an SNMA alumni is, their perceived benefits versus their desired benefits. With this survey, we can find out if our perceived benefits are matching their desired benefits and what they feel is most beneficial to them. And lastly, I touch base on updating the database, making sure that their emails, their contacts, their regions, right? Because sometimes people move, and how they even want to be involved in SNMA are all up to date. Not all alumni want to be on a panel. Some may rather engage in guest speaking or podcasts or mentoring and so forth. Next slide. So now we have reached towards the end of our presentation, where we will each state what we've learned. Throughout this process, I've learned the importance of different departments working together and the efforts of not being able and the effects of not being able to access a central source of resources. I also gained a much better sense of an overall structure of SNMA and the importance and the role that alumni play within SNMA. I also learned how to operate as a strategy team and how to address a problem statement. And now I hand it over to Safan to state what she has gained from the overall experience project and close us out.
I'm thankful for the opportunity to work on such an important project regarding the future of SNMA alumni engagement. Together, we learned a lot about SNMA's rich history, and meeting the various SNMA committee leaders and current alumni showcases how important SNMA is to so many people. Our recommendations were made with all their contributions and hard work in mind, as well as how we can continue to support SNMA in its mission to support underrepresented in medicine students as they become better clinicians in the communities they care for. We would like a special thank you to all the alumni who allowed us to interview them, the SNMA leadership that allowed us to interview them, and of course the Future Leadership Project, those who are in charge, the leaders, and all those who made this presentation and the outcomes possible. Thank you.
I'm muted. Thank you so much. For the sake of time, we do have a couple of questions in the chat, so I'm going to read out one question and then feel free to respond in the chat to any other questions you see. So we have a question from Brittany about if you were able to get in contact with anyone from the Alumni Affairs Committee and if you all had any ideas for an event that SNMA could potentially do in the future at AMEG for alumni.
So I can speak on that. We were able to contact Crystal Megwood, who was part of the subcommittee, and her committee was involved with, I believe, the alumni mixer. And I would say, at least from what I've learned from that specific committee, they are already doing a lot to engage alumni. I think really what could better support them is, again, a database that allows them to reach out to more alumni more strategically, so they're not reaching out to the same small number of alumni. And then two, some way to get the information more accessible, like disseminated, so that more alumni are aware of what's going on with the mixer and ways they can get involved.
Alrighty, sounds good. Thank you, ladies. Alrighty, next up, we will have Strategy Team 2. Ladies, whenever you're ready, feel free to start.
Can we control the slides? Hello, everyone. Welcome to. We hear an echo. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Strategy Team 2. Today, we will be presenting on SNMA Regional Organizational Efficacy. Here is a brief agenda of what we will cover today. So first, we will do introductions of our team member, go over our project plan, talk about our investigation and research phase. Next, discuss how we implemented our project data, and then review our data analysis and any recommended next steps. Next. So here is our team. Next slide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Adenuba. I'm currently in my gap year. Although I do not have prior SNMA leadership experience outside of FLP, I do have leadership experiences, which are also listed on the slide.
Hello, everyone. I'm Cheyenne. I'm currently in my gap year as well. I have some past SNMA leadership experience and general leadership experience is listed on the slide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany Yagum. I'm a first-year medical student at Texas A&M, and I've had undergraduate experience as a chapter president and also my local SNMA chapter.
And here we have our principal investigator, Dr. Matthew. She is the Chief Health Officer at City Block Health and has served as the previous National President, Region 6 Director, and in other various SNMA positions. So here is our team's problem statement. We were tasked with understanding how we identify the variation in practices amongst regions and standardize practices across each region while allowing the regions to harness the best practices for themselves. And so at first glance, we looked at it from two objectives. So the first objective was centered around communication across the regions and local chapter level. And then second objective was around transitioning of leadership across each region, and we decided to focus solely on objective 2. Next. And so here are some key takeaways that we learned from our investigation and research phase, starting with the first point was that there is no documentation of regional transitioning in any of the national governing documents. Each region transitions in their own individual, or they have their own individual transition process. And then we also had to figure out our target approach, which we took a 3-tier approach. So how regions transition themselves, how regions transition their chapters, and lastly, how they transition each local chapter. And we decided to focus on the first tier approach, which is how the regions transition themselves. And our next step was to develop a timeline for our project plan. So we did this in phases. So first phase, investigation and research, which I discussed in the previous slide. And then next was narrowing down our scope of our project and creating our regional transition survey. Afterwards, we sent out the survey in December, and we did have to extend the deadline a little bit into our phase 3, which is our implementation phase, which was to analyze the data and find and create like an approach. And then phase 4 was our feedback and revision, which was collecting some of the missing data that we needed and also creating an additional survey for other data to be collected.
So for our implementation, we created 2 surveys for data collection. One survey was the Regional Transition Survey, which we used a Likert scale and open-ended questions to ask about the transition experience. The other survey we created was the Regional Transition Document Survey, which we did not receive responses despite further inquiry. On the slides, you can see some pictures of the surveys that we had. For our quantitative results, the Region Transition Survey revealed that all regions were represented, with Region 2 and Region 5 having the most submissions. Also, we received a diverse range of responses from individuals of different region positions, which is listed to the right of the screen. So during the process, we found that 25% of the respondents, this percentage is made up of Region 4 and Region 6 leaders, agreed to already having a regional transition conference in place. And we also found that in addition, 50% of the respondents rated their transition experience between somewhat or very smooth. When asked to rate their SNMA leadership knowledge before and after their transition into their role, the study revealed that 58% increase of SNMA leadership knowledge after the regional leaders transitioned into their roles. So 4 common themes were identified when regional leaders described their transition process. This is listed as continued communication with their predecessors throughout the year, individual meetings outside of the scheduled transition meetings, regional director support from previous regional directors, and the use of transition documents in the transition process. And we also have a list of examples of the responses that we receive that fall under those categories. So for the limitations, regional leaders identified common limitations in their leadership transition. This includes the lack of communication from their predecessors, the timing of transitions, the lack of specific subcommittee trainings. This particularly fell under community service, and also not having regional documents or having regional documents with outdated information, which could hinder the transition process. And lastly, having a varying transition experience, such as a predecessor having a lackluster transition, can lead to a less effective leadership transition for the incoming regional leader.
So some of the suggestions we got from our transitional survey include incorporate transitional documents, a virtual retreat for transitions, and regular check-ins. And we use this all to build our recommendations. So on the left, you'll see a list of the different documentation we received from our original transition survey. And in the end, after looking at all the data, qualitative and quantitative, we decided a comprehensive and standardized approach would probably be the best and most efficacious in terms of making sure regional leadership is able to turn over and transition in the best way possible. And so some of our ideas is the first one is a standardized transition guide document. So that would involve requesting all the transition documents from all the regions to understand the different intricacies. We know they're all independent bodies, but to kind of understand the different intricacies, and then from there, highlight the best parts of those and hopefully build something that works for all. And of course, different things will work for different regions and we'll allow that leeway there as well. And then also the idea was a transition retreat and conference. And this could be virtual as well, or it could also be in an established events such as AMEC, RMEC, or RLI, or NLI, something that allows everyone to come together, all the preceding and the succeeding regional leaders, and allow them to all come together at one time to make that transition possible. So this is an example of a standard transition document template we had. So this would include key contacts and relationships in your region that are important to hand off to the next person, different activities that worked well in your region, just a breakdown of each things that should be included for each region as each region transitions. So what's next? If you use our transition document example, you would collect all the transition documents, the currently existing ones in each region, and find a time that everyone could come together to build one that would work for everyone. And then some of the lessons we learned is time management is key, not just between us three as a team, but also when you're asking information through a survey, of course, you need to make sure there's enough time for everyone to respond and enough time. And so we also utilizing our connections and resources from our FLP leadership allowed us to get the most out of our data. And of course, having good communication between team members. So we just want to say thank you to all of our FLP leadership team, especially Adaku, who is our strategy team coordinator. We also want to thank all the past and current regional leaders that responded to us, and our project investigator, Dr. Matthews, and also all the consultants we had, and Dr. K, who also helped us with our qualitative analysis and how to approach that. Thank you, everyone.
Great job, ladies. I'm going to see if we have any questions for you all in the chat. So if you're watching, you have any questions, please drop them in the chat. I actually have a question for you guys. How are you planning to distribute this transition guide template out to the various regions?
Yeah, so I can answer that. I know when we had talked to other regions, and even Dr. Matthews had said, some of the regions have existing documents. So if we could come together and work on something that works for everyone at an AMEC and an RMEC, that can be discussed with the regional directors, the ARDs at the specific regions, and then trickle down through. I think that would be the best way to do it, involving everyone, make it a comprehensive document, and then it going from the top to the bottom.
All righty. Thank you, ladies. Right now, I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so I'm going to move you guys off the stage, and we're going to get ready for the next presentation.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so next we'll be hearing from Strategy Team 3.
Okay, I'm going to share screen. All right, I think we're ready to go.
All right, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. We are Strategy Team 3, and our project was focused on re-envisioning the electronic resources that SNMA uses. So the agenda for today, we're going to first go into the introductions of our team. We'll talk about the SNMA mission and how that is encompassed by our project. We will talk about the objectives and timeline that we use to implement our project. We will discuss the methods that we had in creating our survey and the data that we used for analysis. We will discuss the results of our survey and the metrics that we use for gauging usage of the website. And then we'll go into future recommendations that we have for SNMA in promoting and advancing their presence online. So first, we would like to show you our team for Strategy Team 3. The first two are our amazing PIs that helped us not only gauge our website and create our project description, but also answered any questions and concerns that we had throughout the process. So Dr. Gaines and Dr. Sanders have both held leadership positions and conducted mentorship with SNMA, and were incredibly instrumental to our project. And then there is Ariana, Tamika, and myself, who we'll share in the next couple slides about. So my name is Deja Scurry. I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. And although I haven't held any leadership positions in SNMA, I've held other leadership positions in other organizations, such as being an intern for the New England Medical Association and being involved in Black Women in Charge Incorporated. And then in my free time, I love to listen to music and work out.
master's student at Columbia studying human nutrition. I was involved with SNMA through the National Leadership Academy last year when I attended AMEC. Other main general leadership activities that I've been in as a student leader with the Weill Cornell Anti-Racism Committee and as a pre-med liaison for Society of Black Academic Surgeons. When I'm not doing anything medicine or SNMA related, I'm enjoying all forms of music, learning languages, and engaged in any form of fitness.
My name is Ariana Duckett. I am from Waldorf, Maryland, and I recently obtained my BS in psychology from Spelman College this past May. I've had several SMA leadership positions, especially at the undergraduate level in my MAPS chapter. I've also had general leadership outside of SNMA. And when I'm not doing anything related to SNMA or other leadership positions, I love to read, ice skate, and listen to 80s and 90s R&B. Deja, you're muted.
Sorry. So our group thought it would be important to discuss the SNMA mission as it creates a foundation and scope for understanding our project and its importance. And so the SNMA mission states that the Student National Medical Association, or SNMA, is committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students, addressing the needs of underserved communities, and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. And our presence on the online, through social media, or our website is crucial to creating this mission and pushing for the development and maintaining of socially conscious and clinically excellent physicians. So why would revamping the website be important, and how does this pertain to our president's agenda? So the objective 1 and goal 1 of marketing talked about increasing the visibility of SNMA's programming and initiatives for not only members, but key stakeholders outside of the organization who want to know what we're up to. Additionally, goal number 2 of our 5-year strategic plan talked about marketing, maintaining a strong presence online, being a crucial part of our success. So with that, we created a couple of goals and results that we wanted from those goals in order to create a successful project. So goal number 1 was to understand how the website was being used and who exactly we're reaching with our current website. And from there, we wanted to provide recommendations to increase not only the visibility of the website for people using it, but also our key stakeholders, as discussed through our goal. Additionally, we wanted to understand the user experience of the current website and provide recommendations to improve the user experience based on the feedback that we received. So with that, we implemented a couple of key things into our project. And we had a timeline based in different phases, where our first phase was spent defining our original goal and our project schedule. Phase 2 consisted of our initial meetings with our PIs, and we created a review of the entire SNMA website for the first time. We then outlined some new goals and took a new direction and searched for website managers that could model what a medical website should look like. We then developed our survey and gained metric data that we analyzed. And then lastly, we distributed our survey, conducted data analysis for it, and then developed a kit for SNMA's use. So in all the data that we used, we used a numerical data set from headquarters that contained information about website traffic, the usage, and the user profile from the past year. And we also created a qualmetric survey sent to members that had different categories. So our first 2 questions were rating-based, the second 2 were multiple choice, and then we had 3 open-ended questions where users could talk about their specific experience. And we gained a total of 176 responses.
With the information that we received from headquarters and then move on to survey information. We gained trends of the website at large, and we found that most users access the website via desktop computers at 56%, followed by mobile devices at 46%, and lease use was 9%. And that's important because we want to understand how we can format the website so it's most effective for users. We also found that the lowest engagement happened during Q1 during 2023, and the highest user engagement happened during Q4. And so with this in mind, we wanted to understand how individuals were interacting with the website. And we found that the most visited pages included at 70.5% the SNMA main page, followed by the AMAC pages for both 2023 and 2024 at 18%. Lastly was the new members resource pages during the Join SNMA page at 4.2%, and average engagement time was about 2 minutes and 4 seconds during 2023. With this traffic, we found that actually users had a pretty good impression of the website. So on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the greatest impression for the user experience, survey respondents gave us an average of about 3.64, so better than we actually expected. But we did request suggestions for improvement, and a lot of the responses were around the layout, update, design, and aesthetic, as some suggestions being minimize pop-ups, have a more personalized page, and improve the aesthetic of the page. Users had these options for why they access the page. And do keep in mind that this is not on a scale of 100, as survey participants were able to select more than one. 85% of respondents gave us conference information as the main reason why they access the SNMA website, 62% for regional and national events, 59% for looking at information for involvement with SNMA, followed by donations at 19%, contacting officers at 25%, and 9% for other. And other reasons included membership, finding information about committees, getting information about the mission, and SNMA, fellowships, and scholarships, amongst quite a few.
So another question that we asked on our survey was, where do users get their information? So if we look at the pie graph over here, we can see that Instagram and email were the two most popular forms of communication that members get their information from, with Twitter and Facebook being the least popular sites. And one thing that's important to note from this slide is that only 18% of members primarily get their information from the SNMA website. However, if we move on to the next slide, we see that 93% of members still consider the SNMA website a necessity. So most people recognize the website as a centralized or a comprehensive resource, but perhaps it's some of the issues that was mentioned earlier by Tamika that prevents people from using the website as a primary resource, such as the outdated layout or the outdated information. So surprisingly, almost 33% of respondents reported no trouble using the website for their current needs. However, over 50% did report some dissatisfaction or issues accessing the website, such as mobile access issues, conference registration issues, just the aesthetics and the layout in general, and navigation issues. So with that being said, we've developed several recommendations that the SNMA can use in the future to address these issues, such as having continued emails and newsletters, and more Instagram engagement with scholarship information, conference information, and just other information regarding the SNMA. We also recommend that the SNMA create a more user-friendly and an aesthetic design, and consider adding features such as a search box and an AI chat box function, and also adding hot links on the main page for easy accessibility. Because among our survey responses, we did see that accessibility and issues with the layout of the website were the most prominent issues. We also recommend that most commonly reached pages should be expanded, and access on mobile devices should be improved, because mobile issues were also something that we saw often in our survey responses. And then we also recommend that there be quarterly website audits and updates. And the idea behind this recommendation is that gathering updated information for the SNMA website is important, because interested members, stakeholders, and other people interested in SNMA should have access to the most up-to-date information that accurately represents the status of SNMA today. We've also made a list of a couple of website managers that the SNMA can reach out into the future. And then we also recommend that there be a more regional presence on the SNMA website and more information on regional events so that people can get involved in their respective regions. We would like to give a special thank you to the following people who made this project possible. So our PIs, Dr. Gaines and Dr. Sanders, Adaku, our strategy team coordinator, and Megan Bork-Stith, the SNMA website consultant. Thank you.
Well, thank you, ladies. Just scanning the chat for any questions. So there is a question from Sarah. She says, are there any other national organization websites like LMSA or AMA that you all found that address the considerations that you made for your future recommendations?
I can answer this question. So I will say that when looking at those websites, such as the LMSA, the AMA, overall, their layout and their accessibility seem to be a lot better compared to the SNMA website. I did a little bit clicking around on the websites, and I didn't really see some of the issues that I've personally had with the SNMA website. So I will say that those websites have had better layout and improved accessibility among their websites.
Alrighty, thank you for that. You guys got some more questions in the chat, so feel free to respond to those, and we're going to go ahead and transition over into our national committee presentations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so to give us a little background on the National Committee projects, I'm going to bring on the National Committee Project Coordinator, Erin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erin Iguachu, and this year I had the pleasure of being the National Community Coordinator, and I worked with about 10 to 12 fellows, and they were each assigned a project from the national committee teams that serve in the SNMA BOD. And they served in various roles. Some of them made podcasts, some of them did surveys, some of them looked into our membership committee. A lot of them took on like extra roles doing their fellowship. So they really got to intertwine themselves with the national committees and serve as a fellow throughout the year. So today we're going to be taking a look at the projects that they've done. Each of them are very different, but they all come together to show what SNMA is doing as a whole.
Alrighty, thank you, Erin. Alrighty, so I am going to bring on our first National Committee Project Fellow, Nina.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's so great to speak with you all today. Let me figure out how to advance my slides real quickly. Ruby, do you mind advancing it for me?
I got you.
Awesome. So it's so great to speak with you all today. My name is Nina Uzoigwa. I'm a National Future Leadership Fellow who worked closely with the National MAPS Committee this year, a committee whose mission is to represent the pre-medical and post-baccalaureate section of the SNMA. Before we begin, let me take a few moments to fully introduce myself. I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, and graduated from Harvard University with a degree in bioengineering and a secondary in global health and health policy. I'm currently an MD PhD candidate at NYU Grossman School of Medicine and have been the FLP for the past year. I wear many hats, which include and are not limited to being the co-founder and co-director of Rise Up, a URM outreach program for high school students interested in becoming physician scientists, and also being the Diversity Committee Chair of the National Thoracic Surgery Medical Association as I aspire to be a CT surgeon. In my free time, I love dancing, lifting, baking, reading literature, so thank you for giving me a moment to share snippets of my story. Next slide. All right, so here's our agenda for this evening. We're going to go over the SNMA mission statement, then talk about Project SNMA Impact, its purpose, the need, an overview of the objectives and the timeline, then talk about the survey description, the budget proposal, and the funding, then talk about next steps and current solutions, and then have our Q&A session. Next slide. It is with great joy that I am presenting Project SNMA Impact, an extension of the Pre-Medical and Medical Students Challenge Research Project. This project is rooted in the SNMA mission statement, which is as follows. The Student National Medical Association is committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students, addressing the needs of underserved communities, and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. Next slide. The primary purpose of Project SNMA Impact is to identify barriers and facilitators in pre-medical advising experienced by SNMA due-paying members during the med school application and the matriculation processes. This project will also highlight the effectiveness of the SNMA resources and programming in helping to bridge identified barriers, identifying high-yield and underutilized resources. Working to underscore SNMA successes in areas for programmatic engagement will serve as a platform for building more chapters and pathway programming across the nation, thereby fulfilling SNMA's mission of supporting and increasing diverse healthcare representation. So why do we need this? If we go on to the next slide, we will see that we need metrics to measure the efficiency of the SNMA as a nonprofit in supporting our pre-medical community across the nation, bridging gaps in education and inspiring HRMs to become powerful influencers of tomorrow. On the next slide, you could also see that this will also help with data-informed decision-making, also inform strategic planning and measurement of progress, and it also allows for documented emphasis of the organization's efforts to educational institutions, allowing for local chapter support. And it also allows for leveraging of metrics to diversify the SNMA funding resources from alumni, grants, sponsorships, and donors. Now let's talk about the timeline of this project. So if you go on to the next slide, you see that first phase is to formulate our research team. Then we'll perform our literature review, going over 60 different studies and literature. Then we'll go through the phase of going through the research development, then talk about sponsorship and funding, then IRB approval, then dissemination of survey with a campaign on social media platforms, and then analysis of drafting of publications and presentation of this information at AMEC in next year. So the first step of our project was to assemble our team. These are the masterminds that help generate our current national survey. So of course we have Niyant, my mentor, who is the current MAPS Vice Chair of Administration. We also have Dr. Robert Trevino, who is a Tour for Diversity mentor and researcher. We also have Dr. Jessica Fowler, who used to be a past pre-medical board member and also works at UPenn, and of course Dr. Jaber Bennett, who is a Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at Michigan State. After gathering our team, we then completed a robust literature review, if you can see on the next slide, reviewing 60 plus existing studies and literature that explores challenges faced by pre-medical and medical students. These reside in 6 different categories: academic, learning environment, institutional, social, finances, and psychological. And we're also able to identify facilitators that help these barriers, as seen in yellow. For example, in the academic category, barriers included lack of awareness of the pathway to MD, as well as low GPA and MCAT scores. And on the flip side, we can see that early academic and career preparation, as well as mentorship and advising, were crucial to combating this. And the list goes on. And if we go on to the next slide, after our literature review, we then built our survey, which consists of 4 different parts. We have our demographic survey questions, the educational background, which then talks about the pre-medical and medical experience. And then we have a section that assesses the pre-medical advising experience at their respective institutions. And then in our last section, we talk about how these students have utilized the SNMA to bridge gaps in the application and matriculation journey. Students are then able to rank what resources and programming they use and how these were used in their application and med school decisions. There are about 60 questions in this survey, taking about an hour to complete. We shared this survey with our national board members, Emeriti, professional board members, and SBC for 2 weeks, and where they added their comments. We're very grateful to have their time in doing this. If you go on to the next slide, we can also see that we had a meeting with the executive committee in February, and we were told to include a section that evaluates the implementation of the community service protocols amongst our local chapters to see how students were understanding their responsibility and also how they were implementing events under these categories. So our next question becomes, where are we on our current timeline? If you go on to the next slide, you can see that we are still in the point of getting sponsorship and funding. Next slide, we can see that we propose compensating our participants about $10 each for completing the survey, as compensation is necessary given the survey's length. After speaking with representatives from the executive committee, we're working on being able to reach out to McGraw-Hill companies, as they have philanthropic grants that provide to nonprofit organizations focused on educating the next generation of leaders. And there are several educational philanthropies listed that we know of that we can look into in the next few months, such as the Walton Family Foundation, the Wallace Foundation, and Arnold Ventures. So then what are our next steps? We can see that in the next slide as well. Our first step is to secure adequate funding. We want to be able to apply to the aforementioned organizations and work with the National Treasurer, National Chairperson, Grants Committee, and legal team to finalize our financial documentation. We then also want to be able to obtain IRB approval. This would involve creating a data sharing agreement with the SNMA Executive Committee and legal team with approval from our Emeriti and PBMs, and also submit our IRB application to NYU and defend this survey in front of the committee. Then the survey dissemination is set for summer 2024, where we work very closely with our regional directors and the External Affairs Committee to disseminate and broadcast this survey, encourage our pre-medical and medical students to fill this out. And then we'll go into analysis and presentation, where we're closely with our mentors and consultants to analyze, gather data, present information to our financial supporters, and prepare for presentation at AMEC in 2025. Lastly, we want to look into sustainability. We want to be able to make sure that we're able to create a comprehensive blueprint documentation, allowing for implementation of this survey on the 5 to 10 year time interval. So we're able to diversify our data and make sure that we're able to apply for different types of budgets and proposals in future years. So given all of that I've said, I want to take a moment to thank everyone for making this such an amazing project. After, once we go into our Q&A session, if we go into the next slide twice over, we can see that I'm so thankful for the FLP, my peers, and the following people who made this project possible. This project will not only affect this generation of the SNMA, but many future generations of the SNMA. And I'm really looking forward to hearing any questions or concerns that people might have about Project SNMA impact and things I've said that before. So thank you so much.
Great job,
Thank
Nina.
you so much, Bria. I really appreciate it.
Great job. So I see that we have a question from Blessing. She says, impressive work. What challenges do you foresee or have you encountered in securing funding for this work?
I think the biggest challenge that comes with this is being able to use many different outlets to sort of secure funding for this project. Again, it's an hour-long survey. There's 60 questions. Each question is very important for being able to understand each applicant as a whole, their backgrounds, the kind of things that are sort of implementing and making the decisions that they're making in the later parts of the survey. And so being able to sort of figure out like who we're going to access money from, being able to pull together different resources and the different types of funding opportunities that we have is really important. So I think the tricky part is being able to figure out who are going to be our main sponsors, who are going to be our main players, and how much can we ask for each organization to support us in this endeavor.
All righty. Well, Nina, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for helping and hosting. I really appreciate it.
No problem. All righty. We are going to transition into our next presentation. All righty. So Woodliff, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to talk about the Global Health Fellowship survey analysis that I did. Next slide. So we're just going to cover a quick introduction to who I am. We're going to talk about the SNMA mission statement, and then we're going to look at the Global Health Fellowship overview, goals, timeline, the survey results, and then we're going to look at some data analysis. We'll talk about some limitations and obstacles, and then I'll give some special shout outs. Next slide. So this is just a little bit about myself. I'm originally from Haiti, but I've lived in Miami for a while. And my background in being Haitian is what got me interested in the Global Health Fellowship. I'm involved with SNMA. I've attended AMEC. In my free time, I like to cook, do some fitness, do some reading, and try new things like food, languages, stuff of that nature. Next slide. So what exactly is the Global Health Fellowship? It is a fellowship that spans 6 months. We have 2 tracks, the Health Systems track and the Medical Spanish track, which I will talk about later. And the purpose of this is to provide SNMA members interested in global health with knowledge and skills to serve under-resourced global communities. And the goal is to diversify the next generation of global health through leaders and change makers. And how does it relate to the SNMA mission? Well, it ties in by, this fellowship is serving to aid in creating the culturally competent and socially conscious physicians that SNMA works to produce. Next slide. So what exactly is the SNMA mission statement? Well, the SNMA mission statement is to commit itself to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students, addressing the needs of underserved communities, and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. Next slide. So what are the goals of the Global Health Fellowship? So we had 4 goals. The goal of the health system is to introduce fellows to global health and health disparities. And what is the intended outcome of that? Is to equip them with the skills and knowledge that they need to serve the under-resourced communities that they seek to serve. The medical Spanish track is to introduce fellows to physician-patient interactions and health communications in Spanish. This is to diversify the next generation of global health leaders by making sure they speak Spanish or understand Spanish a little bit. And then the research and presentations is to allow the fellows to develop and perfect their presentation skills, and also granting them the chance to get further interest and further research on a topic that they're interested in. Next slide. So what does the timeline look like? So over the course of these 6 months, we recruited our fellows. We had them complete a pre-survey. We had them attend classes. We had them conduct research. We had them present their research. And now we're going to have them complete their post-surveys. Next slide. So what is the importance? Why even institute the Global Health Fellowship Survey at all? So it will allow us to determine how effective the fellowship is in achieving its goals. And this is important because it allows us to review the course, right? So it allows us to see if we need to implement any changes, like get rid of things, add things. And it also allows us to determine how satisfied our fellows are. Did they meet their goals? Did they get what they want out of this? And the objectives is, how do we get to the objectives? Is to collect data, analyze the data using the surveys, and then we go ahead and implement those changes. Next slide. So what does the data show? Next slide. So when we gave the surveys, we asked the fellows what year they were in. For the health systems, we noticed health systems and medical Spanish. We noticed that we had everybody from pre-meds to MD-DO students, post-grads, post-bacs, grad students. And for the health systems, we noticed that some of them had studied global health in undergrad, whether that be through a class or club, a master's program, their med school, or they had no previous knowledge at all. And so we asked them, how did they see themselves using global health or health systems in their career? 40% of our fellows said that they would be using it above 50% in their careers, or spending 50% of their careers in global health, whereas 60% of our fellows said they would be using it or spending 50% or less of their careers in global health. And the purpose of the survey or the health systems was to understand the global health, share knowledge, be an advocate in public health work, according to our fellows. And when we asked them the results or what did they get out of this, they said they saw an increase in their knowledge. Some of them took mission trips and some of them got more involved with global health work. Whereas the medical Spanish, like I said, the years, and then some of them were exposed to Spanish through their friends, family, media, or school. And then we saw that 90% of our fellows wanted to dedicate above 50% of their service to Spanish speaking populations in the future, whereas 10% of their fellows wanted to dedicate below 50%. And so when we asked them what are their goals, some of them said was just to improve their Spanish, was just to gain confidence, was to be able to give patient care and interpretation. And some of them just wanted to learn medical Spanish. And for the results, we noticed that they gained practice and some medical Spanish knowledge. Next slide. And this is what our surveys looked like when we collected it. This is the health system survey for 21 to 2022. Notice that when we asked the fellows how confident they were in these topics that we would be discussing, the red and yellow shows majority not being confident. And if we look at the next slide where we collected the post surveys, you'll see that majority of them did gain much more confidence in the survey, much more confidence in the topics that we covered. Next slide. And this is the medical Spanish post survey for 21 to 22, and I have the one for this year. The challenge with this is that we didn't have the ones from previous years, so we couldn't really compare and contrast how much confidence they gained or how much knowledge they gained. Next slide. Next slide. So obstacles and limitations, we noticed that the surveys, we had technical difficulties with getting access, but we overcame that eventually. It did have delayed analysis of the surveys, but after some time, we noticed that, just talking to some people, we were able to overcome that. For the health systems and medical Spanish, we noticed that we were missing data, whether we didn't have the pre-survey or the post-survey. And that's because the program is relatively new, and so are the surveys. And getting responses wasn't mandated. So some of our fellows didn't feel the need to do it. And we also noticed that some of the survey questions weren't as directed as we would like them to be. Next slide. And so my recommendation for improvements in sustainability after reviewing the post surveys and looking at what the fellows want for medical Spanish is to have quizzes, assignments, practice sessions, provide third-party resources like Coursera. Medical Spanish terminology course, proficiency groups is to divide the groups based on their proficiencies. Program length is to increase the program by like a month or two, maybe. Assignments and instruction emails, sending out emails before and after the classes just to let them know what their assignment instruction for next time is. And for the global health systems, we should ask on the surveys how to improve the program and how satisfied the fellows are. And for the pre-surveys and post-surveys, we should have them set their expectations and then ask them how it went. Overall, I think we should mandate surveys. That way we would get much more data next time. And also allowing survey access through SharePoint for anybody who needs it, such as myself or any of the other co-chairs. And it's also to implement quarterly surveys for the program, like maybe every 2 months, sending a survey just to determine how it's going. Next slide. And I just want to thank you guys for your attention, allowing me to present. And I just want to give a special shout out to Rochelle Fletcher and the entire NFLP team for all of their guidance. And I also want to thank the Global Health Fellows for completing their surveys. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you, Woodliff. If you have any questions, again, please drop them in the chat. Blessing Lawrence says, for global health systems, can you expand on how this program prepares fellows for global health work?
Of course. So when analyzing the surveys, I realized that majority of our fellows realized that there was a lot they didn't know initially. And after that, they learned a lot of information, whether it be about the finances of global health systems or just exactly what it does mean to be a part of global health. Majority of them talked about not realizing that some of them may have had a savior complex, and some of the lectures that were presented talked about how to not have a savior complex and how to do global health work for the fun or just for the purpose of doing it without feeling like you're saving somebody.
Alrighty. Brittany says, for the global health program, do you foresee other languages such as French being implemented?
That is an excellent question, Brittany. Right now, we only have medical Spanish, but I'm pretty sure if a lot of people ask around, like if a lot of our future fellows were to recommend that we have other languages such as French or whatever other languages they deem necessary, then we would work to do that, yes.
Alrighty, and final question. Sarah says, are there any plans for surveys of alumni of the program to see their involvement in global health?
That is an excellent suggestion, Sarah. I'm not sure if there are any plans right now. Our only plans is to get more of the fellows to do their pre and post surveys. However, I would love if we were to implement surveys for alumni to see how the program affected them and if they are currently involved in global health. That is an excellent suggestion. Thank you for that.
All righty. So that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you so much, Woodliff. Great job. All righty. Moving along, we're going to bring on our next fellow, Kaylin Jeter.
Hello. All right. So my project was on the Academic and Clinical Excellence in Training, or ACET Protocol Handbook. Next slide. So just a little bit about me. My name is Kaylin. I'm currently a second-year medical student at Howard University. I'm also the Region 6 ARD. Just have some general other things, fun things. I used to be a former ice skater, stuff like that. Next slide. So with this project, I worked with the Pipeline Mentoring Institute, or PMI, fellow and the coordinator. So just a big shout out to them for helping me with this project. Next slide. So I wanted to start with the mission of SNMA. The Student National Medical Association is committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students, addressing the needs of underserved communities, and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. Next slide. So what is ACET? The Academic and Clinical Excellence in Training Protocol Handbook main goal is to give kind of an overarching guide for students, whether they're pre-medical students, medical students, on what it's like going through the medical school process, whether that's applying to medical school or even applying for residency. And that kind of overlaps with the mission of SNMA in terms of supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students. Next slide. So when I had first started the project, we had 3 big objectives. That included doing an editor or collaborator search, doing an expansion of the article list that was already kind of worked on, and gauge what needs the most support in terms of the handbook, with the overarching end result being the completion of the handbook by AMEC. Next slide. However, we hit some roadblocks in terms of kind of getting this handbook underway. We had an unexpected transition in PMI leadership, which kind of made the project a little bit stagnant. The project had previously been worked on, but had no kind of direction when I had started working on it. A lot of things had kind of been left alone, including articles that had been started in the draft phase but had not progressed to final edits. This is just an example of some of the articles that were worked on. And out of the 30 articles that were started, only 10 had made it to the first drafts and only 1 had made it to the final draft. Next slide. But based off of those roadblocks, we were working on how to adapt to them. And how did we do that? We adjusted our objectives. We asked for help. I spent a lot of time working with the PMI fellow and coordinators, as well as the national committee chair for FLP, and just trying to continue to make sure that there was momentum with the project and that it did not just kind of stay on the shelf. Next slide. So to do this, we adjusted our objectives, and that included adding a 4th objective with a new end goal. And the 4th objective was to look at the interests of pre-medical students in a handbook like this, and that was through implementing a survey to see if that would be something that pre-medical students would be interested in terms of a handbook that would kind of help them through the medical school process, and determining what kind of articles and information that they would want to have, with the new end goal of, having an understanding of what pre-medical students would appreciate and setting up a plan of how to continue with the handbook. Next slide. So from the first kind of objective, we consulted an editor or collaborator. And from that meeting, we learned a couple of different things about our project and what we kind of needed to work on for the handbook. And that included having more regular meeting times and delegating tasks, creating a tracking sheet, reaching out for new submissions, since the submissions that we had were not fully completed, and we wanted to make sure that we had an expansive handbook, as well as getting assistance from marketing and publication offices at institutions to consult on our project, and working on the completion of articles prior to focusing on the graphic design and layout, kind of working on the meat of the handbook instead of kind of working on the other things, as well as giving actionable dates and pressuring people to finish on their given deadlines. Next slide. The next objective was creating an expansive article list. So since there had already been articles that had been worked on with topics such as 10 things I wish I knew about before starting medical school, the importance of mentorship in medicine, 3 reasons why I love studying medicine at a Caribbean medical school, we wanted to kind of expand the list to focus on SNMA topics. So things such as what to expect at your first AMEC, which SNMA National Committee matches you best, and SNMA History 101 were important for us to include since it was going to be a part of SNMA, and we wanted to give members the opportunity to kind of look at the different parts of SNMA and to learn more about it. Next slide. Objective 3 was to create the article checklist, and that included going through the articles that had been previously written with the names of the writers, the names of the articles, the folders, and what stage the articles had been in, to kind of get an overview of what we needed to do with the articles and how best to kind of like tackle the next part. Next slide. For objective 4, that was our new objective of the pre-medical survey. And with that, I worked with the research and evaluation team in order to create questions to add to the survey. And that survey was going to be sent out to pre-medical and MAPS members to gauge their interest in the handbook. And then depending on the responses, reevaluate how the project needs to continue and what to include in it. Next slide, please. So on this are just some examples of the questions that we came up with in our survey. It includes stuff about what you would like to know about the medical school application process, would the information that in the handbook be helpful if it included things about DO programs, and what concerns you the most about the medical school application process, and any additional topics that they wanted to be covered. Next slide. So the next steps for the ACET handbook that we had talked about were the creation of a PMI position that focuses solely on the ACET handbook. We thought it was important that the handbook doesn't continue to be stagnant, and because of the roles of the PMI fellow and coordinators, and they have other topics to kind of worry about, we thought it was important to include a role that focuses on the handbook so that we can continue to work on it. We also wanted to expand the search for editors and graphic designers and writers to cover all of the topics we want, because the handbook has so many topics and so many different articles that need to be written. It's important that it includes a wide team. Other suggestions were the incorporation of suggestions from the pre-medical survey in order to incorporate information that the MAPS members wanted in order to best set them up for success, as well as to continue to push the ACET handbook forward and to make sure that it doesn't continue to be stagnant. Next slide. So that was the end of my presentation. I just wanted to thank the FLP team for working with me on this, as well as the PMI team. I'll take any questions.
All right, Kaylin, great job. Just waiting on questions. I know it takes a while for people to type sometimes, so if there are no questions at this time, I won't hold you, Kaylin. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh, hold on. We actually do have a question. So we have a question from Anna. She said she loves to know more about the brainstorming behind creating the article list and how SNMA focused topics were created. And also she wanted to know if there was a survey of pre-meds to see what they would be interested in.
Yes, so for the expansive article list, some of the topics were already created that were more broad about just like the medical school process in general, but the SNMA focused topics were created based off of kind of me looking through the website and looking at the different things about SNMA that people may have questions on. You know, if people are interested in joining national leadership, kind of what their next steps are and kind of different things with that. In terms of the pre-medical survey, it was created. We're still kind of like editing the little bits of it, but it's mostly supposed to be looking at would they be interested in a handbook that would kind of give them information about applying to medical school and then kind of what it is to be a medical student. And yeah, also includes different articles that maybe they would like, kind of different topics in terms of like being an IMG student, being a DO student, and then they're free to insert any other topics that they would also like.
All righty. We have, I think, a couple more questions in the chat, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on to the next presentation. But again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we're going to have Hans do his presentation.
Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Hans War, and I'm a rising third year at the CUNY School of Medicine, representing Region 9. And going into our 60th anniversary, I really wanted to take time to highlight just how much our organization has grown over the years as we look into the next 60 years and beyond. So with that, I'm excited to be here today to present my final FLP project titled The Growth of the SNMA, a look into the past as we move into the future. Here's a brief overview of today's presentation. We will go over the purpose of the study, the timeline, the results, the conclusions that we drew from our findings, and the future recommendations that came out of this project. Before we go any further, I'd like to highlight our mission, as it is the driving force behind everything that we do as an organization. The Student National Medical Association is committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students addressing the needs of underserved communities and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. Building on that foundation, the purpose of this study was to examine trends in new membership enrollment from 2014 to 2022, understand the evolving membership landscape, and then finally offer actionable insights for our strategic planning. In our mission to support underrepresented minority medical students, being data-driven is not an option, but a necessity. Data enables us to measure our impact accurately and identify the most successful initiatives. Capturing comprehensive data is complex, and we should always continue to ask ourselves the most efficient ways to collect data, how to interpret it effectively, and how to implement strategies that have a broad and positive impact. This approach equips the SNMA with necessary tools for targeted strategic planning, ensuring our growth and innovation as we continue to push our mission forward. The study was planned across 5 distinct phases. The first phase involved gathering membership data, focusing on accuracy and completeness. Next, we cleaned and prepared the data for descriptive analysis. In the third phase, we analyzed the prepared data to uncover trends and patterns. Then we interpreted our findings and drew conclusions. And finally, we synthesized our findings and identified future directions for the SNMA. So what did we find? This chart shows the overall new membership growth between 2014 and 2022. And in 2014, the organization reported 878 new members. The number of new members varied yearly with a notable upward trend. A significant increase in the annual intake of new members was observed starting around 2017, with 1,453 new members joining that year. This growth peaked in 2021, with the organization reporting a remarkable 2,823 new members. This chart shows membership growth stratified by reported gender during the same period. And in 2014, the organization reported 588 new female members compared to 256 new male members. And this trend of higher female membership continued throughout the period. And by 2021, the number of new female members peaked at around 2,000 members, significantly outnumbering the 662 new male members in the same year. This next chart shows the growth in new membership across different regions between 2014 and 2022. In 2014, the region with the highest number of new members was Region 4, contributing approximately 186 new members. And over the years, each region displayed varying growth trends. Notably, in 2021, Region 4 again led with the highest influx of new members, nearly reaching 600. This next bar chart presents the trends in new members stratified by membership types. Throughout the study period, the 4-year active membership type had the highest number of new members, indicating a strong influx of students committing to a longer-term membership. In 2020, a significant increase was observed with the 2-year active membership type, suggesting a potential shift in preference. This chart also shows that the 1-year associate membership type was the most popular among our MAPS members. Our in-depth analysis revealed several key insights about the SNMA's membership growth. First, we observed significant overall growth in our membership numbers, a testament to our organization's increasing reach across medical schools and undergraduate institutions. Particularly noteworthy is the dominant increase in female members over the years, and we also found that growth varied by region over the study period, with significant growth, particularly in Regions 4 and 6. Armed with these insights, our journey doesn't end here. Continual data collection and analysis should remain a cornerstone of our strategic planning. And we recognize the need to increase our male members. I believe it's important to note at this moment that in general, Black males are severely underrepresented in medicine. And knowing this, and being a Black male in medicine myself, I believe it is important to look at ways to bolster our pipeline programs, specifically the BASE program, in order to address this disparity at the root, which is around that high school, early college period. Next, it is important to understand that each region has its unique challenges and opportunities. And with that, we need to continue to look at ways to provide region-specific support to enhance local engagement and growth. In closing, I just want to say that it's imperative that we continue to grow as an organization, but it is equally important that we continue to evolve as well. With the medical education field constantly changing, we must evolve as an organization to ensure the SNMA remains a dynamic force in supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students for the next 60 years and beyond. With that, I'd like to thank everyone who contributed to this project, namely Lakia Bailey and the entire HQ staff, membership NCCs, FISI and TOSIN, and my entire FLP cohort. This has been a very insightful experience for which I'm very grateful for. And with that, I'd like to open the floor to any questions.
Great job. You have several questions. I'm going to put them up on the screen. So Christine said, what impacted the sharp growth in membership between 2019 and 2021? What was unique about SNMA's engagement during this time?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think, understanding that we were in a virtual space in 2020 could be the answer for that slight plateau in 2020 and then that sharp increase in 2021. That's something that I will continue to look into with our membership committee.
All righty. Nina says, what factors do you believe contributed to the increase of membership in certain regions over others?
Yeah, I think it all boils down to our programming at the local and chapter levels, right? So what are our chapters doing to engage prospective members at our medical schools, at our universities, and continuing to look at ways that we can, mirror these engaging programs across the whole country.
All righty. Grace said, what do you think SNMA can do to encourage more students to opt in for 4-year memberships or 2-year memberships? And what are your suggestions for increasing Black male membership in SNMA?
Yeah, to answer the first question, I think just increasing our marketability as a whole organization, putting our membership benefits, opportunities, and resources at the forefront. Earlier we talked about engagement on our website. So looking at ways that we can package our website to be more marketable to prospective members. And to answer your second question, again, I think addressing the problem at the root, instilling in young Black men that you don't have to be an athlete or a rapper just to be successful, right? You can be a doctor, and kind of like planting that seed very early on in their middle school, high school, and early college days.
Wow, Hans, the chat is blowing up with questions. Okay, let me see if we can do one more. So we have a question from Dr. Posse. She says, for Black physicians, there's an equal percentage of men to women, and for Black medical students, about 5% more women to men. What do you think contributes to more women members?
Again, I think it's the engagement that we're doing at our local institutions. So looking at ways that we can engage our Black male pre-meds and medical students, like developing specific programs that are targeted at that male demographic.
All righty. Hans, like I said, you have quite a few questions in the chat, so definitely take a look at those.
Yes.
Great job, and thank you for sharing.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity.
For sure. All righty. So moving along, we're going to bring up our next National Committee Fellow, Blessing Lawrence.
Sorry about that. Had some issues getting the slides up. Hi, everyone. My name is Blessing Chiduto Lawrence, and I'm going to be basically just talking about the SNMA National Advocacy Forum, which is a project that I worked on with the Health Policy and Legislative Affairs Committee. So this is our agenda for today. I'm just going to be going through like what the project was about, some challenges that we had, as well as the survey that we ended up administering at the end, results and recommendations for like the future. So a little bit about myself. I'm a second-year medical student at SUNY Upstate Medical University. I have a background in public health, specifically epidemiology and biostatistics, and I have a few leadership experiences as well as serving at my current medical school SNMA chapter. And I also like in terms of like hobbies, just basically like reading, watching shows, and a little bit of like fitness. So this is a team that was very instrumental to this project. So Karina and Tori are the HPLA, which is a Health Policy and Legislative Affairs Committee co-chairs, and Adaya is the vice chair. They were very instrumental to the work that I did. So everything comes back to our mission. As we know, like the SNMA is committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students, addressing the needs of underserved communities, and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. And I bolded this part because it was very instrumental to informing what the project was about. So HPLA basically just going to highlight like the role of the committee. It's basically focuses on like all of SNMA's advocacy efforts, basically educating members on the legislative and policy process in the country, what that looks like. And the committee does this by like giving like the webinar series on advocacy and also like presenting like opportunities for members to participate in different like advocacy initiatives. So for the project that I worked on for FLP, my objectives were as follows. The first was to assist in planning of this year's National Advocacy Forum. And the next two objectives were basically to help with AMEC and health policy workshops, and also to provide support for RMEC, which is a regional medical conference, and basically to help their like health policy initiatives. But as we'll see, like those last two objectives changed due to challenges that we face along the way. So NAF is an initiative of the HPLA. What this basically entails is that it's a forum, like a webinar that basically enlightens participants on the legislative process, and basically provides information on nonpartisan electoral advocacy, grassroots advocacy, empowering patients from underserved communities, and advocating for disparities as future physicians. So this includes like presenting webinar series that focus on advocacy in different areas, as well as an opportunity for like members to meet with legislators in DC. So the last meeting was done in October, and the two webinars that we had were, that's what the flyer on the left-hand side is showing. We had people come in to speak about like specifically about what like advocacy looks like, advocating for different bills and how to go about that, basically like an advocacy one-on-one type of thing. And then we had another speaker who came in to talk about like advocacy specifically related to maternal health. So we've seen like significant growth in NAF attendance, including like the webinars, as well as like going to DC for the advocacy day. So we had 9 people who participated in 2022 and 38 in 2023. So the changes in these projects were one due to basically the second objective was already completed before FLP started, so I didn't have the opportunity to work on that. And then the third objective changed due to issues that occurred during like the length of the program, with changing my project mentor, as well as difficulty getting in touch with the point person for that would have allowed me to address the third objectives. That said, we obviously found a way to move forward to make sure that we achieve like success with the project. So we developed a survey, which is what Objective 2 was talking about, to evaluate perceptions on health policy before and after the National Advocacy Forum. That's what NAF stands for, and also to create data-informed recommendations for future initiatives. So this basically just talks about the importance of data, why we collected the data, how we used a survey form, which was like a Google form. We did very basic descriptive analysis on the questions that we had, and then we developed recommendations on how to implement the data that we got. So this is like a snippet of the survey. It was broken down into the 3 categories outlined here, and in bracket I have like the number of questions for each category. So we had about 52% of National Advocacy Forum attendees who responded to the survey. So the survey was administered to basically anyone could respond to the survey who was an SNMA member. And then we had about half of the participants were actually those who went to participated in the webinar or actually like attended the advocacy day in DC. So these are some results, basically looking at understanding of like health policy advocacy. And we see the majority had like moderate understanding of health policy. We had 23 responses in total. So here we can see that like for how people obtain information on health policy advocacy, a lot of people got the information on social media, and then some people also got some information from like social media professional networks. And here, for the effectiveness of webinar series in augmenting their understanding of health policy, a lot of respondents indicated that it was extremely effective or like very effective in basically like advancing their understanding, which showed us that NAF is working. So for recommendations are basically that like we need to create like a concise educational material on policies regarding on policies on basically like an educational material on different policies regarding advocacy and reform, and basically like detailing how like members can better like advocate for different policies. So a lot of like respondents had indicated that professional networks are a major source of how they obtain information on health policy. So we basically thought that if the HPLA could create like the recommended like advocacy toolkit, like a document that would be housed on the SNMA website, SNMA members can have like a one-stop location to quickly learn about different health policies and to stay updated on health policy issues. And of course, by addressing topics that have been identified from the survey respondents, we thought that it would be much more useful to maximize the impact of NAF and different advocacy efforts that SMA is involved in. And that way the webinar series can serve as a platform for like educating members about like the key issues that they are interested in, and also to mobilize support for specific causes and empowering them to take action. So basically this will make like the efforts more like geared towards like what members are interested in. And with that said, I will take any questions.
Alrighty, so you have a question from Charlene. She said, what were main strategies that were implemented that allowed participation of National Advocacy Forum to increase from 2022 to 2023? And were these continued during your project?
So yeah, a lot of this was with a lot of, I think also with like new leadership, like with the new committee, I think that was serving the HPLA like in 2023, there was a lot of advertisement for like the National Advocacy Day, as well as just a lot of like spreading the word in different like forums throughout SNMA about like attending the webinars, and also about like participating like in participating at the Advocacy Day in DC as well. So I think because of like all the extra effort that the team put in doing that, as well as when I joined when I joined FLP and started working on this too, we just like sent out a lot of like messages. I think that like was very instrumental to get more people to join the webinars and also like to sign up to go to DC as well.
Well, thank you, Blessing. Great job.
Thanks.
All righty, we're going to move on to our next presentation by Grace Akpali.
Perfect. Hi, you guys. Good evening. So I'm going to be presenting about my project, Demystifying Disabilities in Medicine. And just to go over the agenda quickly, this is just an overview of the slides to come. So I wanted to start off with just going over the SNMA mission. The SNMA mission statement is as follows. The SNMA, or the Student National Medical Association, is committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students, addressing the needs of underserved communities, and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. So we wanted to start off with the mission statement because this project directly addresses one of the core parts of our mission as an organization. And that portion is bolded, as you can see here on the screen. So just to give you a little bit about myself, I'm originally from Adelphi, Maryland. I'm currently a second-year medical student at Rush Medical College in Chicago. I went to University of Maryland College Park, studied biology and dance with a Spanish minor, and graduated in 2019. I have a lot of leadership roles, but most notable within SNMA, I've been the Region 2 MAPS liaison for the past year. I'm also one of the NFLP MAPS Fellows for this year. Move on. Just to introduce you to some core mentors of mine with this project. I had two amazing MAPS committee members, most notably Logan Dean, who was my primary mentor for this project. And she was the SNMA pre-medical board member. Also Niyat, who was the MAPS vice chair of administration. So just looking at it, here I have a percentage, 7.6%. And you're probably wondering, what is the significance of that number in regards to U.S. medical students? Well, according to the AMC Graduating Medical Student Survey, 7.6% of students disclosed in that survey that they identified as having a disability or chronic illness during medical school. However, only 2.5% of medical students with disabilities or chronic illnesses sought accommodations during their training. And this survey was from the most recent 2021 graduating student survey. I don't think the results for 2022 are out yet. But just going over the project, so obviously there is clearly a need for medical trainees with disabilities or chronic illnesses, just because there seems to be, as we saw from the last slide, a lack of support or perhaps awareness of resources that are available, as many are unsure about how to gain accommodations or may even hesitate to seek accommodations due to stigmas that exist within the field. So the three main objectives with this project was to highlight and address, certain challenges that students might be facing at the medical school stage, residency and beyond, and then also creating a resource document and sharing success stories of students who have been successful in their pursuit. And then on the bottom, we have the outcomes. So we were able to develop 2 Q&A styled webinars consisting of panelists at the medical student level, residents, as well as attendings. We also drafted a resource document that was targeted towards the population and hope to submit for JSMA publication. So the timeline of the project here. So it started off in September, in September of 2023 with developing the project proposal. And then in October, that was when I met with my mentors to kind of just hash out some of the ideas and set some guides or some goal dates for the webinars. In November and December, I kind of started that process of seeking out and recruiting speakers. I had a few other team meetings, one with Mia, and then also one with our our political advocacy personnel on the National MAPS Committee. And then in January, I pretty much finalized most of the speakers and worked on webinar scheduling. At that time, we had certain dates that eventually would be moved around, but that was the first time we had a couple of dates on the calendar. And then in February, I primarily worked on getting familiar with the Streamyard system, as well as conducting webinar 1 at the end of February. And then this past month has really been just kind of drafting that JSNMA article, as well as webinar 2, which will happen later on this month as well. So project outcomes. So the main outcome that happened, again, as I mentioned, was the 2-part webinar series. So for the first webinar, it was the medical journey, the medical school journey, and we had 4 panelists at each stage of their medical journey. So we had an M1, an M2, and an M3 or rising M2 that had started clinical rotations. And it was a 1-hour Q&A panel, which is, as shown on the slide, broken down into the various sections. We did receive a high volume of applicants. We actually had a large number of students who were interested in being panelists from the MSDCI group. The MSDCI is actually an organization which is the Medical Students with Disabilities or Chronic Illness nonprofit org, and they have a lot of members who also overlap with SNMA and LSMA leadership. So all of the participants are a part of that organization and are also a part of SNMA as well. And as far as questions that they answered, there are a set of pre-prepared questions as well as audience questions, and the recording is now available as one of the live webinars from our organization. For part 2, which was the Beyond Medical School webinar, very similar format to webinar 1. We received a list of recommended physicians from the pre-medical board member and the National MAPS Committee. And originally there was going to be a session at AMAC So this was an opportunity to kind of utilize speakers who were going to speak at that session that ended up being cut. It was originally scheduled for March 12th. However, we're pushing that date later on this month just due to some scheduling conflicts. And the finalized panelists for this webinar was going to be 3 residents and 2 attendings. So challenges and proposed resolutions. So there are several challenges that I faced with this project. I think the biggest thing was kind of conflicting SNMA webinars as well as conflicting schedules on the webinar end. The other challenge, obviously, like the JSNMA criteria and the deadline. So by the time we kind of had our team set up, it was really hard to get a good time that worked for everyone that wanted to be involved in the So You Want to Be a Doctor with a Disability article. And then also just the team meetings, like being consistent or finding a good time that worked with everyone. I eventually used When to Meet for like one of the last meetings that we had, but I wish I had kind of incorporated that requesting system earlier. But just to go into the proposed resolutions that I have here on the side. So I think really the biggest thing I would have done looking back would have been getting a good list of the schedules of ongoing panels and then submitting my request or my Marcom request to block off that date for my webinar, and then being a little bit firm with the deadline or with the dates with my speakers. I think that would have helped as far as not moving too many things around. And then also trying to phase the project a little bit more because it was hard to get the resource article going with all those meetings. So if I had prioritized just getting the webinars done in the fall or a little bit earlier, I could have then used the last few months of the NFLP fellowship to work on the article. So future directions. One future direction, or the first future direction I would have had would have been to have like an intro webinar, just going over different timelines, as well as like relevant terminology. Like sometimes our panelists would talk about concepts like masking or high functioning, and that might not be familiar for some people. Broadening the scope so that we could maybe include a webinar or additional advocacy resources for our SMA members who want to be allies or advocates for their patients with disabilities. And then, as I mentioned on the previous slide, like phasing the project and having firm deadlines with people who are working on my team. And then lastly, I think the biggest thing I would have incorporated would have been pre and post surveys for the webinar attendees. But yes, so I think those are pretty much the 6 major future directions I would have for this project or recommendations for taking it to the next level if someone picks it up next year. And then finally, I just want to thank everyone on my team. I want to thank Logan. I want to thank Niyat. I want to thank all of the panelists for their work and the advice and for them sharing their stories with us. And then also the MAPS External and the SMA External Affairs team. They made wonderful flyers for the webinar as well as just our program throughout the year. And I'm very thankful for the support from my NFLP program co-directors and the leaders, as well as my Think Tank Challenge group and the NFLP cohort at large. And I will take questions now if anyone has any. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yep, you're good. Trying to give a second for questions before we move on to the next presentation, but great job, Grace.
Thank you.
Alrighty. So we have a question from Cheyenne. She says, how could we support and advocate for disability/chronic illness at various medical schools?
Would this be more so from a student perspective or for patients? Kind of just a follow-up, but I can actually answer for both. I think supporting, like perhaps being understanding. Sometimes there's students who maybe you have a classmate that has to take additional break time, or there might be some students who also have like visible disabilities. So it helps to not stare or at first just being kind and considerate of people and what they might be going through. And then I think from a patient perspective as well, as like making sure that you treat your patients with respect. I think a lot of patients with disabilities and even sometimes at chronic illnesses, there's like at times maybe some ableist culture and ideals or stereotypes that might exist. So really making sure that you still involve them in, healthcare decisions, and respecting like their autonomy. There's a lot of instances where that kind of happens as well.
Thank you, Grace.
Thank you, guys.
Righty. Next, we're going to transition over to our next presentation by Malik Mitchell.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this evening speaking to you all. My name is Malik Mitchell. I am a first-year medical student at the UNC School of Medicine. And my project was the Brotherhood Alliance for Science and Education, being a part of the Revival Task Force. This was a project that was very near and dear to my heart, as I'm very passionate about increasing the number of underrepresented minority men in medicine. Next slide, please. Oh, and so here's a brief agenda. I'm going to give you all a little background. We're going to talk about the importance and the impact, the timeline, objectives, sustainability, deliverables, obstacles, and challenges, and then we'll end with questions. And so, background, what is the Brotherhood Alliance for Science and Education? What is BASE? And so BASE stands for the Brotherhood Alliance for Science and Education, and it's pretty much a program that aims to increase encouragement, recruitment, admissions, and retention among young minority males. The program also seeks to promote, bring minority men together for a common goal, and then also foster a sense of brotherhood among each other, because I know you heard the saying, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. So promoting a sense of brotherhood is very pertinent in this program. We also focus a lot on mentorship, empowerment, and motivation. So we can push our students to achieve their goals, because support is very crucial along the pipeline into medicine. And then the program also, one of the main goals of it is to address the gaps in educational opportunities, the lack of proximity to positive role models sometimes, and even to address different misconceptions about what it means to be a minority man who is high achieving and who is entering medicine. And then we also hope to provide tangible skills and support to the minority men from primary education all the way through the undergraduate and post-baccalaureate levels. Next slide, please. And so let me tell you a little bit about the importance and the impact, why BASE is important to the Student National Medical Association community and SNMA medical students in general. Next slide. And so I want to talk a little bit about the inputs. The inputs are the things that we want to do. And so like we wanted to increase the number of URM males along the pipeline into medicine. We wanted to foster and develop mentoring relationships between pipeline members and beyond. And then we also want to expose our students to different areas of higher education and health careers so that they know these goals are attainable, in addition to instilling the importance of being community-centered and community-driven and empowered. And after these inputs, some things that we hope to get out of our inputs are strengthening current ties between medical students and undergraduates with an emphasis on mentoring, like reaching back, because we were just undergraduates not too long ago. So we know a lot about what it takes to get into med school. And so we also have a focus on collaborating with MAPS to achieve BASE program goals. There's some minority men in MAPS that we can target. And then In addition to that, we want to form long-lasting relationships with the organizations we work with. So the elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, and things such as that. And then we also want to make sure we're fostering a relationship with the parents. And so we can get some longevity in terms of student participation. And then we also want to collaborate with other organizations such as the NMA and faculty to have a strong support system and mentorship for men across a multitude of academic levels. And so what was my timeline? And so August to October, it was a lot of brainstorming and preliminary ideas, trying to design the application. In November, we focused heavily on curriculum design. What were students going to be doing when they logged in for the virtual program? What were they going to be learning about? In December, we tried to have a tentative timeline of how we wanted things to run during the new year, and expectation goals and things such as that. In January, we launched our application for the program. Students were able to apply, and we also picked finally our final touches on the curriculum, the timelines, and speaker invitations and things such as that. And in February, the program began, and it's currently March, and the program is soon to conclude. And so what were my objectives as an NFLP fellow on the base team? And so some of my main objectives was I really wanted to establish effective communication with the force. I wanted to conduct preliminary research on the curriculum. I wanted to recruit mentors to participate in the program, and I wanted to aid in the evaluation and improvement of the base program. Next slide. And so how did we keep this project sustainable? So we have a Microsoft OneDrive with all of our resources. We have a speaker list that members in the future that are on the base task force can look at and reach back out to. We created some surveys. We have some email templates to send out to people we want to invite. Also some transitional documents, and then we have a lot of meeting minutes with detailed things that we discussed. Next slide. And so what are my deliverables? What did I create? And so I created a survey that focused on getting feedback from each of the programs we had, asking students about the general experience, how was their mentoring experience, how do they feel about community engagement, and other additional feedback that they may have had for us that wasn't specifically asked. And so what were my obstacles and challenges? Some of the main issues that came up was there was a very sporadic transition that was a little confusing. That was a major hurdle, but we were able to get over it. There were many communication barriers, especially with that sudden transition, and then also balancing the rigors of being a first year medical student and balancing the NFLP program was very difficult. And so with that, what are your questions? What questions do you have for me? And I just want to take a moment to thank everyone, the base team, the NFLP family, and all my mentors that assisted me to get to this point.
Great job, Malik. I'm just checking the chat for questions.
Thank you.
Alrighty, if there are no questions at this time, please feel free to leave them in the chat. And we're gonna go ahead and transition over to our next presentation. Again, great job, Malik.
Thank you.
Alrighty, Sarah, the floor is yours.
Hey, hello everyone. My name is Sarah Abdella, and I served as the NFLP Fellow for the Health Policy and Legislative Affairs Committee this year, and my project surrounded fostering minority medical student participation in health policy and advocacy initiatives. So a little bit about me. I'm a first-year medical student at the University of Maryland School of Medicine. I went to Johns Hopkins University for undergrad, And throughout undergrad and medical school, I've had the pleasure of serving in several roles in SNMA as an NFLP Fellow now, a previous Global Health Fellow, and now as Community Service Chair for my medical school chapter. So here's today's agenda. I'm not sure why the text isn't showing up on my side, but we'll be going through a few things in today's agenda, starting off with the SNMA mission, going through HPLA's goals, the HPLA team, and some of our objectives, as well as some barriers that were faced and some future goals and reflections. So I love to start off with the SNMA mission statement, just because it really captures why we're all here today and how this project works to propel our mission forward. So SNMA is committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students, addressing the needs of underserved communities, and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. Next slide, please. For my NFLP project this year, I worked with the Health Policy and Legislative Affairs Committee, also known as HPLA, and our committee's goals really centered on educating SNMA members about legislation and policy developments that really align with our mission that I just stated and provide opportunities for students to advocate for health policy. Next slide, please. Here are some of the HPLA team members that I worked with throughout the year and that I've had an amazing opportunity to get to know during our monthly leadership meetings and our general board meetings. So for this year's fellowship, we originally had 3 objectives. Our first objective was to identify relevant legislation and advocacy events and workshops that align with SNMA's mission. The second one was to establish an HPLA webinar series, which has never been done before. And then our third objective was to foster more engagement through social media, through the HPLA website, through the webinars, and through the newsletter. So for our first objective, I primarily used the National Conference of State Legislators to track new bills, and I filtered by relevant topics such as health disparities and social determinants of health. In our drive, I created an Excel sheet that tracked these different bills that aligned with SNMA's mission to be shared with members either through our social media, through Slack, or the newsletter. This also included descriptions of each bill, who it was introduced by, and the statuses of the bill. One of our biggest events of the year that was presented by Blessing earlier is our SNMA National Advocacy Forum, where SNMA members have the opportunity to engage with legislators and learn more about the legislative process and how to advocate for health disparities as a future physician. This is such a vital opportunity to empower minority medical students to have the tools to amplify their community's voices and promote legislation that reflects the voices of those who often go unheard. We were also able to promote this event through social media, GroupMe, Slack, the SNMA newsletter, and the website. Another opportunity was Advocacy Day in Annapolis just over a month ago, where I was able to reach out to SNMA, LMSA, and the LGBTQ interest groups from different medical schools around the Maryland area to advocate for bills that really align with our organization's collective messages. On the left, you can see myself, as well as some other University of Maryland School of Medicine, SNMA, and LMSA students, and the 2 bills that we advocated for. Next slide, please. Okay, our second objective was to create an HPLA webinar series. As the fellow, I created a list of 11 potential webinars that surrounded around minority health, diversity in medicine, and actually how to be an advocate while in medical school and beyond. Due to some logistical issues, which will be covered later in the presentation, our first webinar on having a nationalized healthcare program wasn't until February 23rd. However, we had a great turnout on Facebook Live and YouTube Live and sort of figured out what are the next steps for the upcoming webinars and how to make it more smooth. For our third objective, to foster more engagement, we were able to produce the HPLA Fall 2023 newsletter, which was our first newsletter since 2021. This was shared with members via email and also on the SNMA website. The spring newsletter is currently in the works to be released in late March, early April. In the newsletter, we were able to include legislative updates like the ones in my bill tracker, upcoming events, and ways for members to actually get involved. in advocacy from home, such as 5 calls, which generates like a script for you to call your congressperson about different issues. I also included some social media posts that I made on the national SNMA account, breaking down different bills and how it aligns with our mission and how to get involved. Next slide. Okay. Some of the challenges that I faced throughout the year were some unexpected transitions in leadership. So some people were taking on new roles, some people were leaving HPLA. So that made it more difficult to figure out who I'm supposed to be coordinating with and working with to make the webinar series happen. The timeline, the logistics, and the funding for the webinar series were unclarified and quite frankly, like not there. So we had to figure out what to do in terms of that, and in terms of securing speakers as well and coordinating who could be a potential guest speaker. And a third challenge that we also faced was coordinating meetings and communications across different time zones. So even creating like a when to meet, some people would get confused if they're on the East Coast, West Coast. But some ways that I was able to adapt to this was by attending and actively participating in the monthly HPLA leadership meetings and getting to know everybody and what some different roles I could play. I actually ended up assisting with a policy statement on equitable residency hours, which is an initiative by the HPLA committee. I also started working with our new membership chair, Enriqueta, once she joined on, which made things a lot more smoother on who I'm supposed to talk to, and also laying the groundwork for next year's webinar, keeping all the work that I've done in our shared drive so people can refer to that. Next slide. Oh, next slide after this. Okay, so our future goals are to regularly hold a monthly webinar and secure funding for the series. Again, that wasn't really clarified for this year, so I hope for next year for that to be set in place. I would also really like to evaluate the effectiveness on the webinar on the likelihood of SNMA members to participate in health policy. I think that that would be a really great idea to have a pre and post survey. So being involved in HPLA no longer as an NFLP fellow next year, but as a general member, I think that would be something that would be really interesting to be a part of. And third, I'd really like to engage different SNMA regions on the newsletter and how they participate in health policy. I think a lot of the events that I shared and showcased really revolved around Region 6 or like people that were close to DC, just because that's where more of the action is. But I'd love to hear input from the different regions and how we can make an impact on a local level as well. Next slide. And if there's time for any questions, thank you so much.
Alrighty, I'm going to, you have a couple of questions in the chat. I'm just going to pull one of them. Let's see. Nina said, great work, Sarah. What are some barriers in member participation within health policy advocacy?
Thanks, Nina. That's a great question. Something that I found, especially as minority medical students, is that we don't really see people that look like us in the health policy space. So that is one, a barrier. Two, exactly like the location where you're at. So the folks that are closer to the DMV, the DC area, have a lot more opportunities for health policy initiatives. Like we have the National Advocacy Forum every year in DC, but there aren't really as many opportunities outside of this area. So I think that looking at working more in the local level as well would be a future goal for us to make more of an impact, not just nationally, but locally.
All righty. Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
All righty. So moving right along, we're going to hop into our next presentation by Christine.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. My name is Christina Lagoon Samuel, and I'm currently the National Future Leadership Fellow for the Academic Affairs Committee. I worked closely with specialty interest groups as well. So just an overview of my talk today, I'm going to talk about the Academic Affairs Committee, the goals of my project, the overall timeline of my project, the results, and next steps. So just a little bit about me. Again, my name is Christine. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 2020, and I studied health and societies with a minor in chemistry. I currently am a third-year medical student at NYU Grossman School of Medicine. Outside of medical school, I have had a leadership in SNMA. I was the SNMA chapter vice president at my school, and I'm currently a fellow. I also am very interested in medical education. I served as the pre-clerkship course liaison for my school, as well as the Student Diversity Initiative liaison. I'm also the founder of the SHAE Project, which is a program that focuses on health education for Black women. Outside of medical school, I'm really interested in photography and graphic design. So an overview of the SNMA's mission, just because that serves as the foundation of everything the SMA does. The Student National Medical Association is committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students and addressing the needs of underserved communities and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. As I mentioned earlier, I worked with the Academic Affairs Committee, and the mission of the Academic Affairs Committee is to develop and maintain SNMA's resources and designed to assist the general membership in their educational endeavors. This committee serves to further develop the educational and clinical excellence of its members in accordance with the SNMA mission. So the committee works on doing multiple different things, including developing a resource handbook for internship preparation, providing research opportunities, as well as connecting students with research electives and scholarships. So this is the team I worked with. I worked with Joanne Pierre-Louise and Temitope Adeleke, who are both the co-chairs of the Academic Affairs Committee. I also worked with Charlene. She's another one of the FLP Fellows. Together, we served as the SIG vice chairs because there were some issues, and we served as the interim vice chair during our time as fellows. Overview of my project. I worked on engaging the specialty interest groups both as vice chair and also kind of overseeing their engagement via survey that I will talk about later. And then we also helped prepare some sessions for AMEC as well. So why are specialty interest groups important? So URIM decisions in selecting surgical specialties were largely shaped by mentorship opportunities, culture and diversity, and research opportunities. This was found in a recent study. Another recent study found that URIMs, when compared to their peers, actually changed their specialty interests because they were, maybe not as competitive for those fields. So they didn't feel like they were recruited or represented in those fields during their time in medical school. So it's really important to understand how can we help students identify their specialties early on and also be on track to match to those specialties once they graduate. So the specialty interest groups that exist as part of the Academic Affairs Committee supports the needs of SNMA students through academic support, early specialty exploration, and increasing access to research and mentorship opportunities. It also helps students to foster relationships with existing professional organizations affiliated with their specialties. The other things that the specialty interest groups also do is to prepare students for rotations as well as their residency applications. So this includes academic preparation in terms of the STEP exams and also in terms of their rotations. This continues to support the SNMA mission that is focused on providing students with clinically excellent tools so they can thrive in their careers. So just an overview of the goals of my project. Primarily, I was supporting the Academic Affairs Committee. There, I helped organize 2 events for AMEC, which I'll discuss later, and I also helped oversee SIGs and lead their monthly meetings. I worked on a survey that looked at the evaluation of specialty interest groups and their effectiveness in helping students match into their specialty of interest. And then I also am working on figuring out how the SIG vice chair role can continue to evaluate the effectiveness of specialty interest groups and also standardize the way that these interest groups are run. So just a timeline of my project. Around October 2023 was really the brainstorming period, trying to figure out how can we best evaluate specialty interest groups and then also seek to sustain any projects that are implemented during this time. During my entire project, I served as a SIG vice chair along with Charlene. So this incorporated overseeing meetings and communications with the SIGs, and then also thinking about any AMEC programming we wanted to implement at the end of the year. In November, I worked on drafting the survey. I collaborated with the academic affairs chairs to determine what the goals of the survey would be and what form the survey would take. So I drafted the survey. They added some questions in order to best evaluate the specialty interest groups and also best align with the goals of the SNMA. And then between November and February was when I actually implemented the survey. There I distributed it via the newsletter, through regions, listservs, and through the national SNMA newsletter as well. And then February, March, I analyzed the results. And then at AMEC, that's when the 2 events that we worked on will be implemented. So just the 2 events that we worked on were the Academic Excellence Brunch, which is to honor the different SIGs that I worked with, as well as the Tech and Medicine, which is an event that collaborates with various tech groups for each of the different specialties. So this is just an overview of my survey. I wanted to get a sense of who were part of the specialty interest groups, what the membership status was, how was this useful in helping students determine their specialty, and then also its usefulness in various areas of academic achievement. So just an overview of the demographics. We found that a majority of the members were actually SNMA members and not so many were MAPS members, which was a huge gap. We thought that a lot of students aren't really getting early exposure to specialties. We also found that a lot of students were joining during their first year of medical school, which was really good. But again, earlier exposure via MAPS would be a great idea. And then we also found that there were certain specialty interest groups that are a bit more active than others, seeing that anesthesiology was like overrepresented in our survey. We also found that the specialty interest groups didn't really help students decide their specialty. And you know, it was based on a lot of different things aside from their involvement in the specialty interest groups. So this included their own academic interests, like outside of their specialty interest group involvement, as well as the lifestyle or work-life balance of their specialty. About half of the students also mentioned that they did not have a home program in their specialty of choice, which is a huge area that we can further look into mentorship across institutions and support students through the specialty interest groups. When looking at how students joined, a lot of students joined via the GroupMe and not so much through the SNMA website. So again, trying to standardize how we can evaluate the membership of specialty interest groups, seeing that a lot of students weren't official members of their specialty interest group. And then we also found that a lot of students were involved in research projects. However, we also found that a lot of students were seeking mentors as well. So students found that it would be very effective to have a mentor, and they weren't necessarily connected to a mentor through their specialty interest group. And that's a huge gap and area that we can further improve. A lot of students also found that their specialty interest group didn't necessarily help them with preparation for residency, including their step 1 exams, step 2 exams, and other aspects of their application. So overall recommendations is there are a lot of different areas for improvement for specialty interest groups, including academic preparation, research opportunities, and early involvement. And one of the things that I looked into is how we can further standardize how each of the specialty interest groups are run. And that's something that I really want to do in the future, particularly looking at how the SIG vice chair can actually standardize what each specialty interest group does, including looking at ensuring that they have a mentorship program, ensuring they have alumni retention, and they're communicating with their recent graduates to facilitate that, as well as looking at other academic areas, including step 1 and step 2 prep, and also maybe having a research database so that all of their participants do have some type of connection to research, even if their home institution does not have a program of interest. And then additionally, we wanted to look into how we can further understand how the different impacts of different things that impact students deciding their specialty. And that's my project. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing, Christine. You have a few questions in the chat, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to choose one. So Anna says, what ideas do you have for increasing MAP's involvement with the specialty interest groups?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think a huge area is a lot of students actually find out about their specialty interest groups through GroupMe, which is not really a standardized way of kind of engaging students. And the ways that they're getting to the GroupMe are through like group chats for medical students. So as a result, a lot of MAPS members are just not involved in that process at all. And so thinking about ways we can further advertise to and market to MAPS students would be directly engaging MAPS chapters, looking at different regions like newsletters, how we can also incorporate opportunities there would allow us to directly communicate to the MAPS chapters rather than, the indirect way that a lot of students have already been trying to engage with their specialty interest groups.
Makes sense. Well, great job, and thank you so much for sharing. All righty, so last but not least, we're going to transition into our final presentation of the evening by Charlene Shirali.
Awesome, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Charlene, and I was the Specialty Interest Group Fellow this year for my project. Thank you. So just to introduce myself and a little bit about me, I'm from Seattle, Washington. I graduated from the University of Washington, and I'm currently a medical student at UCSF School of Medicine. I have had kind of general leadership roles in the past. Specifically, I was a mentor throughout my undergraduate. And then just some things about me. I like to do gardening. I like to read and write and kind of participate in some yoga in my free time. Okay, awesome. So as part of my project, I was part of the Academic Affairs Committee, and I really worked with Temi and Joanne as my mentors primarily. And they are older medical students, 3rd and 4th years respectively. And the Academic Affairs Committee really works on professional development of pre-meds and med students and kind of coordinating resources and educational advocacy for SNMA members who are involved. And so just to reorient us to the SNMA mission statement, the Student National Medical Association, SNMA, is committed to supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students, addressing the need of underserved communities, and increasing the number of clinically excellent, culturally competent, and socially conscious physicians. And so our project was really oriented around championing this mission and furthering the goals of SNMA as an organization. Okay, so what are the specialty interest groups and how does it help achieve the SNMA mission? The specialty interest groups are groups that are overseen by the Academic Affairs Committee. They are groups that, kind of like the name implies, they are specialty interest, but they're groups for different specialties in medicine that really coordinate webinars, resources, mentorship opportunity for members who are interested in that respective specialty. And they really help to foster connections between that group and its members and the professional society that they're associated with. And so the specialty interest groups are a huge part of supporting current and future underrepresented minority medical students by allowing them opportunity to get involved in the specialty groups that they're interested in early on and often, and really provide that support throughout their pre-medical and medical school experience. Okay, so my objectives as part of my project were threefold. There was the specialty group oversight and planning. So like Christine mentioned, we did fill the SIG vice chair role. So we helped to oversee the specialty interest groups at monthly meetings and coordinate a lot of the logistics and planning between communications between the specialty interest groups and the academic co-chairs. And then the second objective as part of my project was helping to organize the second annual Academic Affairs Excellency Brunch that helped recognize leaders within SNMA on the regional level and also specialty interest group leaders that were putting on webinars and workshops throughout the course of the year. And then our third objective was putting the Tech and Med event planning together. This is a new event that we're doing for the first time at AMEC this year. And the main goal with that was delegating responsibilities to different people on the committee so we can make sure that the Tech and Med event at AMEC was a success this first year. And then that kind of culminates in both those events, the Academic Affairs Excellency Brunch and the Tech and Med event at AMEC. Thank you. So our roadblocks, fortunately, a lot of our roadblocks I experienced with this project were early on, so there was lots of time to address them and re-evolve our project to continue. So firstly, there were transitions in the academic affairs and the project mentorship. Specifically, our mentor ended up stepping down, so we had to take the role of the SIG vice chair. And because of that change in leadership, there was a slight evolution of our project, or my project, from the initial outline, but that was something that we were able to address earlier on. And then just how we adapted to them, being able to adjust to my role as a fellow, working closely with the project mentors and having open communications so that responsibilities were like clearly delineated and we were able to get things done in a timely manner. And then also attending the monthly executive board meetings to make sure that everybody was on the same page with responsibilities and timeline of things to get done. Awesome. So for the first objective, the specialty group oversight and planning, I helped to serve as a SIG co-vice chair and lead the monthly specialty interest group liaison update meetings. And so these included a lot of the different specialty interest groups that we had, giving us a monthly update as to the webinars they're planning, whether or not they need any help with workshops, and different connections they're making with professional societies. And I also helped to communicate issues that were raised at these meetings with the academic co-chairs so that the leadership of the specialty interest groups were able to advance their goals as a group. Next slide, please. Thank you. And so this is just an example of like our March specialty interest group update. It's a slide deck where the progress report is shown and then also just upcoming projects that the specialty interest group is interested in doing. For the second objective, creating the second annual Academic Affairs Excellency Brunch, I helped to create an RSVP form and sent it out to all the leaders through listservs and other outreach methods that we had. And then I also helped to create a flyer for the event for distribution. I believe as of last checked, we had over 250 people registered for that event. So it's quite exciting. You could go to the next slide. And then this is an example of the RSVP that was sent out. And then on the next slide is an example, or is the flyer that we ended up sending out to those who were invited and RSVP'd. And then our third objective is the Tech and Med event. This is the first time the Academic Affairs is putting on a event like this at AMEC. And so we really had to spearhead it from the beginning. So we created a form for specialty interest groups to identify companies to demonstrate technology products from their specialty. That's what the Tech and Med event really is. It's like demonstrating different technology products from different specialties for students to work with and try out. And then I helped to coordinate reach out efforts from everybody on the board to reach out to these companies and create an Excel to keep track of outreach efforts and progress on event planning. And we were able to get a number of different companies to commit to bringing different technologies for students to try out from different interest groups. So for orthopedics, we had Nth Dimensions commit, and then we also had like vascular surgery, radiology, and a number of different interest specialty related technology groups commit to coming. And so on the next page is an example, or is the survey that we had sent out to specialty interest groups to identify whether or not they were interested in participating. And then on the next slide is the Excel sheet that we used to really track a lot of the work that we were doing with outreach. Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for listening to my presentations. I'd love to take any questions if anybody has any.
Alrighty, we do have a question. Anna says, how is the excellency breakfast being used, or how could it be used to increase SIG involvement?
I think that's a great question. I think currently the excellency brunch is being used to increase SIG involvement because it's an invite-only event for SIG members. So to be invited to the event, you do have to be a member of the SIG and you do have to actively participate. And we leave that the definition of active participation to the discretion of the SIG leaders. So they're able to forward the RSVP to their members as they see fit. I'm not sure that it's currently being used to increase SIG involvement specifically, but I would imagine at the beginning of the year, if that is something that is brought up to SIG members as part of like the benefits of being involved actively throughout the year, that it could be a good way to make sure that specialty interest groups are able to increase their membership and member participation.
Alrighty, and final question. How do you, this is in regards to the tech and medicine event, how do you see this event evolving in future years?
Awesome. That is a really good question. I think being that this is the first year that we're putting it on, I think seeing how it goes and seeing what the feedback is from participants, we're currently thinking about sending out like some kind of post-event survey to see if there is any feedback from participants. But I think just in terms of evolving in the future years, we'd love to see more and more interests, like specialty groups, bring in items. And it would be really awesome to actually have like maybe different universities and their departments, their different specialty departments, like fund different events or different booths at the event. So I think those are avenues that we could potentially explore in the future. But I think the best thing to do in terms of immediate next steps would just be to see how the event goes and what immediate feedback is based on like surveys from the participants.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm looking forward to attending the brunch at AMEC and, seeing all your hard work with the specialty interest groups, like just, I guess, come into fruition.
Awesome. Thank you.
All righty. So that is our final presentation for the evening. I know you guys have seen a lot and heard a lot from me, so I want to give our other co-director, Ana Torres, the opportunity to speak to you guys and close us out for the evening.
Thank you, Bria. Thank you for running everything. Thank you, everybody, for staying. We know that was long, but I hope it was informative and that you got to engage with the fellows in a different way and just see what everybody has been working on. Thank you to our leadership team and the mentors and national committee leaders who helped our fellows complete their project. We also want to give a plug because I see a lot of our alumni here as well, which is great that the co-director application is out. So just a reminder for our fellows and past alumni, this is open to you as an opportunity. And for anybody who's new to FLP and just happened to stumble here and want to know how to get involved and want to know more about the projects and the program, you can always email us at flp@snma.org. But thank you again, and we're excited to see everybody at AMEC. So thank you.
Alrighty, this will conclude our presentations for the night. Everybody have a great evening.